Welcome back, beardlings, to the next chapter of the College of Dwarfology, an entire college that apparently only has one book in it. Probably should work on that. For today's chapter, we'll be covering why you should probably start turning aquifers back on. There are a lot of you who have been playing since the heyday of Dwarf Fortress who have essentially sworn off aquifers. Either that or you're new players who started semi-recently and have also sworn off aquifers. Either through lazy new pack or some other means, you don't embark on aquifers, you turn them off entirely using a mod, or you change out the RARs. But there's a new type of aquifer. The aquifers that we all know and love, which we can now call old, but by the game files are called heavy aquifers. And the new type that can be just as insidious, but is far easier to deal with as long as you respond appropriately. So we're gonna go over some of the differences between the old and the new aquifers. I'll be putting a timestamp up above for whenever the new aquifer starts if you are already very familiar with old aquifers, though I suggest you watch anyways. There might be something you don't know about. If we move on, and I'll have this on resume, if we move on, we see that one, I have done a little bit of cheating to reveal everything, but I needed to so we could highlight what all is going on. When digging, this applies to both aquifers. Your dwarves will stop digging as soon as they hit something that they call wet. Oh, this is a wet rock. I will not dig here. Are you sure you want me to dig around it? And as we can see, following the line, really what it is it's just every square that's one out from an aquifer. This includes the diagonals, which is an important thing to be aware of because the diagonal would not actually generate any water from the aquifer. Well, aquifers only generate their water orthogonally, north, south, east, and west, as well as down 1Z level. So even though the game would have said this is wet, be careful, we were completely safe to mine that out. Now that does apply to both aquifers. A heavy aquifer generates a large amount of water, as we can see here, that this aquifer square is generating water there, and it's 2s and 3s, and it's going relatively fast. And down below, I have purposely breached one just so we can see the large cumulative volume of one aquifer. Again, it's only one square that has been breached. Part of the water is running off the edge of the map, and yet still at the back end, we have 6s and 7s. It cannot filter out. It took this much, and really I think it would have kept going if I had a wall here to stop water from running off the edge of the map. It goes a long distance, particularly if it's in your base and it is able to pile up within the tunnels and not spread out to evaporate. This was always the main issue with the old or heavy aquifers, which was as soon as you pierce them, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to get around the issue. If I do a little bit of cheating, and remove this water, we can see about how quick it took for that water to reattach itself. Now, yes, some of it was coming from down here because it was a higher level, but it comes in pretty fast from the aquifers. And already back up here, we're back up to 6s. All we did was chase back the leading edge a little bit. They come in fast. This is what everyone's used to. This is what everyone doesn't like. Aquifers only ever generate up to their Z level. You're good there. If it is generating over a hole that leads to another aquifer, it doesn't actually even bother to represent the water in the air. So you don't have to worry about it there. As long as the bottom of sequential layers of aquifers, as long as the bottom is open, all the water goes to that bottom layer and just gets absorbed in there. It's so porous that the water is able to both generate and be absorbed by those aquifers. While you do have to be careful from down below, if you hit a layer where there is an aquifer, from below, you will get water. This water is generating not from this stone, which we can see here doesn't show up as wet because the water above it is not an aquifer. That shows as wet because the land above it is an aquifer. There is nothing above this, but yet we still got water from the aquifer above. I breached that from below, and I was able to safely do so, threading a needle through everything that was and was not an aquifer, making sure to go down low enough. So if you're trying to get stone, as long as you can get a needle through an aquifer, heavy this applies more to rather than light, you're able to come back up and get the stone. It's not that much of a problem as long as you're careful and know what you're doing. And a baby alpaca is starving. Well, unfortunately, that is not the scope of this video. So, you know, comment in chat if you want me to go back and feed that alpaca. But we're going to switch over to the light aquifer now for what is different with these new ones. First of all, chances of appearing. So whenever an aquifer is generated, the game checks for the drainage of that area. It does a drainage modulo 20. In other words, it takes the drainage number and divides it by 20. If the remainder is 7, then what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with an aquifer. Essentially, this means it is a ones digit of 7, but 50% of that time. Because if it was a 17, then the modulo, the remainder would have been 17, not 7. So it's around a 5% chance that all aquifers are heavy and 95 that they're all light. I say around because that would only be 5% in a completely random number generator with every number being equally available. Whereas with the way the game generates things, as it builds upon different areas, you're not quite so likely to have everything up in the 7s. If something is too low in drainage, something's too high in drainage, it's going to miss this. And not every drainage is represented completely. So this does mean, however, that you can get aquifers in varying dry areas. So if you have a drainage of 87, that would be a 7. If you have a drainage of 7, that would also be a 7. You'd end up with a heavy aquifer in a high drainage area, i.e. damn near a desert, as well as a low drainage area, i.e. damn near a swamp. Just a heads up, you can still get heavies where aquifers may be. If we look at what we got here for the light aquifer, we kind of got a bit unlucky, and the entire Z level is in fact aquifer. That isn't inherent to heavies or heavy or lights. It's just what we ended up dealing with. Now I'm going to remove the water here so we can see what happens. Now I dug down this pretty massive area, probably didn't need to have it that big, but now we see very, very slowly does water come in. Nowhere near dangerous enough to kill your dwarf immediately or to cause a massive problem. If you're doing the walling method where you put a wall in front of the aquifer, you could probably get it done relatively fast. You just need to be making sure to start building the wall as soon as it appears. But also of note, because you're able to so quickly get through light aquifers, because it's not generating the water to piss off your dwarves, you are able to easily dig under an aquifer. This one showed up because the square above it was an aquifer. So this bottom area is actually mostly completely screwed, but if I wasn't paying attention, might not have been aware of this. Because now the whole thing will be generating, and if I was going even lower, I might not know the rate of accumulation that was happening behind me. And we have the water generating as well up here. To speed this along, I'm going to put in the numbers. We're going to re-up this to 7. To point out the secondary issue with light aquifers, and that is time is going. We just have to wait for RNG to not like us. And there we go. We saw a 1 show up at the edge, and it ran around the water before it got dumped onto the shore. A light aquifer is not porous enough to take in water like a heavy aquifer is, which means unlike a heavy aquifer where you would just dig down, say 3 Z levels, and you had 2 Z levels available for doing whatever you wanted. In this one, you really don't. All those Z levels will eventually repressurize back up. So while a light aquifer is far safer to work with, the punishment for not working with it is far greater. But like I said, that's just you paying attention to it. I think the players who have sworn off aquifers should probably go back in and just give a try for the light aquifers. It still gives you the puzzle and a bit of the annoyance of working with an aquifer and dealing with it, but it doesn't completely lock down your base. It doesn't prevent you from going ahead if you're not proficient with one of the 7 or 8, we'll say generally recognized strategies for dealing with aquifers. That being said, a lot of the strategies for dealing with aquifers no longer work. If you were to do the double slit method, which is essentially you have two squares apart, like so, where you are using a screw pump to pump out of one into the other, this method would now no longer work. Because the idea is in a heavy aquifer, it took the pressure. So you could take all the water out of the left one, dump it into the right one while you worked on the left one, making it, replacing the dirt wall with your own construct, or smoothing over the wall to make sure water doesn't come out of it. Some of the old strategies don't work. You're kind of now relegated to more, if it's stone, smooth it over, and if it's dirt, build walls in front of it. You can do some of the old standards, but you need to have, built upon it. It requires a little more infrastructure to get them to work, which really is probably a bit too much effort to deal with such a light aquifer. Even with me filling in that bottom one, this top area hasn't even generated to a full set of 1s across the board. It will eventually fill up, but it's not that big. Just make sure you're walling it over as you go through. Or if you're lucky and it's one of the very rare stone layers that can have an aquifer, you smooth it over. It's nicer for everyone and good to go. Now, some positives to heavy versus light aquifers. If you are someone who just plays with aquifers and aren't really quite sure what type of aquifer you wish to go with. Now, I didn't point it out earlier. I could maybe see if I can get it to generate again, but light aquifers, because of the ability for the water to be showing up, because of how light it is, well, that one kind of went fast. I'm not sure I would count that. That was just the water going down, but perhaps we can see it do that again with the regular little driplets. The individual drops that show up in an aquifer that fall down because it is so light will occasionally generate mist. And because it's not a heavy aquifer, the water itself as it falls down is only going to be a one depth worth of water. So if you put this in your hallway, like you've dug up somehow a singular square and that falls through your base, and it has, there we go, it's generated mist up top, and it falls through your base and it goes to an immediate drain. That way it cannot pressurize up. This is a very safe, without any need for machines, mist generator. So you can, if you're very careful with an aquifer, you can use this for the occasional drops of water through your base. And if you do this somehow, with regular hole strata, you can make your entire base be a mist generator without that much water moving. Because usually when you have large-scale mist generation, there's a lot of calculations that go on because of all the water moving around. Usually it requires machines, and you're doing 7s. You have to be careful with the dwarves because they might complain because it's too deep of water. But if you are just digging below like I had done before with the heavy aquifer, all you would really do is you would do an upstair, and then up above it you would just dig out an up-down stair. Or if you're in the middle of digging, for when you get to this area, just dig a ramp. That'll automatically dig the hole up above, and you're good to go. You have a weird little mist generator. Just make sure to go back afterwards and turn that into a hole to connect to a drainage system so that the water can evaporate. If it's wide enough below you, the water's not going to build up. So maybe do like every up, like just leave a Z level just open, like not even connected, just open for the water to go into and evaporate. If it's large enough space and you're not connected to it, you don't have to worry about it. And because the water is going so slow, you should be safe doing a floor grate because the water will just go through it. It's not gonna be building up or doing crazy lateral or vertical calculations, as it is only one drop at a time. Negative side of this, because it is so slow, you cannot easily use this for reservoir filling. And by that I mean is if you build a flooding hospital or a water trap of some kind, usually what you would do is you would have 2 Z levels or so, just a giant square that you would have open to an aquifer sometime of some kind, so that it would fill up with water, and you can then at a moment's notice dump the entire volume somewhere where you need it to be so it could drown the enemies. You cannot easily do that now, as the water comes in much slower, and having such a wide footprint is likely to cause an issue with the water evaporating before it's able to start building up. My solution to this: just don't do the full square. If you make sure that is instead a series of tubes for both the Z levels, every Z level for every tube has a chance of generating the water around it, greatly increasing the rate of it generating. You do reduce the volume by a good amount of how much you have in total to work with, but this is the workaround to make a light aquifer still be able to relatively fast recharge some water-based system that you have in your fort. Heavies, of course, you just do a giant square and it fills itself up and you're good to go. Plus side to heavies, as we discussed before, because it takes the water, as long as you have below any of your water projects one little hole, like you can go to the bottom of your base, wherever the lowest level of aquifer is, and somehow safely above it connect into that square, then you can work with water up above, and an endless amount of water will go into that aquifer, disappear, you're good to go, you won't flood and you won't die. But as we previously saw with the Z levels filling up with a light aquifer, you do not have this easy method with light aquifers. If you want to work with light aquifers, either do the ramping system off the edge of the base like I discussed in my water mechanics video, or bring a tunnel all the way down to the caverns. The water flow is never going to be big enough to flood out the caverns, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Though maybe perhaps keep an eye out to make sure monsters don't come up from it. I would really suggest, if any of you have completely sworn off aquifers because of stuff that because of issues you had dealt with in the past, I would suggest maybe giving the light aquifers a chance and seeing what you can deal with it. If you are using Lazy New Pack or anything based upon DF Hack, it is possible to look specifically for light aquifers. It's not 100%, sometimes it lies to you, but it is possible to go searching for that very thing. So I'm going to set those to short and low real quick. Generating the world right before your very eyes, just so that we know that I haven't, done this up beforehand. Start playing Dwarf Fortress region. And if it's one of the latest Lazy New Packs, there's a new thing down below that says A for Embark Assistant. You can hit that to find Embark, and underneath Aquifer, you can sort by whether or not you want to have light and heavy, none light and heavy, so on and so forth. You can specify really kind of what you're looking for. In this case, I'll say I am looking for a light aquifer. Is there a way to say light and none? None and light, just to make sure. I think that should exclude the ability to find a heavy, but sometimes I think it doesn't quite understand what I want. But still, this is far better than what we've dealt with in the past for finding these things. Otherwise, again, it's just like a 5% chance of you getting heavies. So this is everywhere that there is supposedly a light aquifer. Not 100% sure I would completely swear by it. Don't think that you're guaranteed, but it says aquifer, no, and light. So it's saying somewhere within that square, there is in fact no aquifer and the ability to have light aquifer. If I go back into this and switch it to none and heavy to try to exclude, we'll just say heavy. I want it to say heavy. To try to exclude everything else, we see now on the map just how few heavy aquifers there are compared to the massive influx of what was a light aquifer. But that's not 5%. I'm not completely all there with the math, but I do know that the 5% thing only works if the number is randomly generated, and world generation here is not randomly generated. A 1 is more likely to show up than a 7. A 7 is more likely to show up than an 11 in terms of remainders, because you build from the bottom up. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. By the time you've hit 9, every number on the ones digit has finally had a chance to show up once. Once you hit 11, 1 has shown up twice before 2 has shown up twice, not counting the tens digit, of course. So I'm not sure if it's above or below. This looks like to me it'd be above 5%, but I could also just be bonkers. I'm not 100% on the math there. But if you have sworn off aquifers, and if I have not won you over, let me know in chat, what about this light aquifer still has you off put? And I'll try to see if in the future College of Dwarfology, we will cover how to do all of the Dwarf Fortress aquifer piercing methods and what works best for each. I'm just hoping you guys give it a chance. It's really amazing, and it's a, how do I word this? It is a refreshment to any of us who have had massive headaches just dealing with aquifers. Because there's so many bases, you just lose your mind dealing with aquifers. And these ones are so much easier to work with, while still giving you that sense of impending doom. Because if you don't, you are so much in light aquifers end you with such a worse position than heavy aquifers do. But that's really that's a punishment on your part if you don't deal with them. If you found this video in any way educational, consider giving it a thumbs up and the channel a like. And if you found me entertaining just by my sweet, amazing voice, give the channel a subscribe anyways. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.